This is the Nourish Together Gut, Heart, and Mind podcast. And today it is my pleasure to have this conversation with James Barry, a chef and creator of Pluck. And I'm going to show you Pluck so you know exactly what I'm talking about. This little spice blend packs a punch as far as nutrient density, and it's delicious. It's like, why not take your vitamins and minerals this way? Here's another little sample example. I send this to my clients and have gotten rave reviews, and I love using the product, especially now as I'm pregnant and need all the extra support I can get. So, James, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, yes. Thank you for having me.
And so, let's get right into what is in Pluck that can help people support their health and even beyond that, like balance hormones. Like, what is in that that can help everyone get a little ahead nutritionally?
Yeah, well, I mean, gram for gram, grass-fed organ meats are among the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. I mean, that's why I created the product because I did the research looking what are the most nutrient-dense foods and how do I, first identifying them, and then I tried to figure out, well, how am I going to get them in my kids' diets? Because this is really what motivated me to create the product, which was my being a father. But
Mm,
ultimately, I think you're in a perfect situation for this conversation because you are pregnant. And if you, in many ways, I can just bounce the question right back at you and say, well, what's in your prenatal?
right. A lot of these vitamins, minerals, I know,
Folate,
what's that?
folate, right? So you have you have vitamin
B
D, you have iron, you have
vitamins,
selenium, you have vitamin A. I
vitamin
mean,
A.
we really, I mean, in many ways, the thing that science is telling us this is what you need to create life. Well, it's all in organ meats, all of it. And in many ways, we call organ meats Mother Nature's multivitamin. And what I love about that is because it's Mother Nature made. So in many ways, when we find things in nature, they are usually balanced as our bodies are best to receive them.
Mm-hmm.
As many people may know that historically, magnesium or iron will come out alone or something like that, or vitamin C or some element back in the day. I'm thinking from the 70s through to the 2000s will come out, and it will come out very isolated, and how they're presenting it. And then of course now, 24 years later, they'll go, oh wait, we just realized you need this to better absorb the iron. And then they'll combine it with
Yeah.
something else, right? Magnesium in most cases, or something else.
Or vitamin K, vitamin D, all the
Exactly.
synergistic things that are naturally occurring in
In nature.
nature.
Exactly. And in many ways, when we're creating something in the laboratory, we are isolating it. We are not, it's pretty impossible to create an entire orange in the laboratory. Like you can isolate parts of it, but really hard to create the synergistic properties. That's what nature does. But what we're learning, the deeper we go into these things, and the more technology we have to identify all the parts of something, we're realizing, oh, these parts actually work together.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of organ meats. It's there. It's already there. It's in its most absorbable form, and it's balanced so that you're not getting too much of one thing and too little of something else. It's literally balanced to best assimilate into your diet. So I'm a huge fan of things found in nature. I do believe supplements have their place, but I much prefer to get as much as I can from nature as I can, as possible.
Absolutely. And it's likewise, I think, diet is such an important piece of hormone balance, fertility in general. But as somebody who's now living it and in supporting another life, all the vegetables and all the uh, fruits, the meats, the organ meats, when you see their profile, like with liver, and this is something traditional cultures knew and have, practiced for a long time, where you ate everything. And it's also a way of honoring the animal, right? The whole nose to tail form of eating, but how it all works together with how bioavailable the vitamin A and the B vitamins, copper in the liver, and then you have the heart, which I used to eat a lot of as a kid and growing up in Brazil. I used to eat chicken heart all the time.
Oh, nice.
It's not as common in the US, but I love it. It has CoQ10 and it has collagen, and then the kidneys have their own profile. But again, everything comes together to really give this boost that's instantly available. Same thing with coconut water, for example, as a electrolyte drink
Natural
that's
electrolyte.
not
Yep.
been made in a lab, and it's so perfect.
Yes, and it's and in many ways, what you're also articulating is like supports like, which is an ancestral concept, but it's there. It's a concept for it's an ancestral concept for a reason. But the idea is that the organ you're eating is supporting that organ in you. And you just mentioned, for example, CoQ10 and heart. Well, what do you find in most heart supplements or medicines?
Yeah,
It's CoQ10, right? So they're trying to identify what is the piece that's going to support your cardiovascular health or health, and that part happens to also be in heart. So heart equals heart, and so forth and so forth with spleen. And there is actually, I'm pretty sure back in the day, Standard Process. They're one of the earlier companies to put like glandulars in their supplements, like so that taking that idea of
hmm
like supports like. And I think they did many studies back in the day where that showed um, that when you have, let's say, a glandular and you take it as a supplement, it they were able to identify that it actually then supported that gland in you, and that's where that idea of proving that like supports like comes from.
right. Adrenal health is so,
Yeah, you what do you when you
yeah,
take it when you get adrenal, when you take that supplement from a reputable company, what's in it, right? Same with bile for, for gallbladder, right? So it's like
yeah,
you're taking parts from that, from an animal, and you're getting that support in you. And in many ways, as you mentioned, eating the whole animal is a very humane thing to do. And sadly, our supply chain here in the US is not really set up for it. I've gone to many slaughterhouses, one recently in Wyoming, and they confirmed what I've been talking about to a lot of people, which is when we slaughter this animal, we're utilizing only about 50% of that animal.
mm,
The other 50%, while we talk about sometimes, oh, it goes to pet industry, it actually not always. Like in the case of this Wyoming slaughterhouse, it gets trashed. So
wow,
we're literally throwing out 50% of this animal, which was incredibly wasteful, incredibly inhumane. And what happens? Well, we're nutrient deficient and we're turning to the supplement industry and we're paying them lots of money to fulfill what we probably could have gotten just from eating the whole animal.
yeah. I mean, bone broth, right? Which is can be another whole conversation. But the organ meats being so important, and what I love about Pluck, and that you created this, and it was around let's see, 2023 when you were presenting at Mindshare, and you brought Pluck for everybody to try. And I just remember thinking like how brilliant that you can actually use those organ meats, but put them in a way that is so palatable. Because a lot of my clients say, I will not eat liver. And that's okay. I mean, all the respect for what people are willing to eat or not eat. But when it comes in this form, it's just so easy. And I love that you call it microdosing because it is. But if people think about putting salt or any other spice that they might put in their food, and in addition or as a replacement, they can choose, they use this, but they're putting this 3 times a day. I mean, it's great in eggs, it's great in popcorn, it's great in the chicken dish I just had for lunch. I mean, salad dressing, everything, right? It's really easy to incorporate, and you can get past maybe some of that concern about eating something you think is going to be that you don't like the flavor or that's a little off-putting because you have to think about what it is. So
Yeah,
how did you come up with Pluck?
yeah, well, so as I mentioned, becoming a father is really what inspired me. But I had learned about the power of organ meats when I first went to culinary school 20 years ago. Yet I didn't grow up eating organ meats, and I didn't really think about how to incorporate them in clients' diets when I was private chefing, other than making like pates or cooking them, straight up like as onion and liver, as you mentioned, like, grilled heart or something. I didn't really know how to really do that, because I don't think I was challenged to do it. I was in my early 30s, and when you're younger, you just don't, I'm not thinking as much about mortality and longevity. It was really when I had kids that I started to be think like that, and I was okay. I want to the best foods in my kids with as little effort as possible. I want them to thrive, be healthy,
Mm-hmm.
but I also want to thrive too, because if I'm not around to grow old with them, then I'm going to miss out on a lot of their lives. So the stakes were raised, and so then it kind of got me thinking. Okay, I know organ meats are the most nutrient dense food, but how do I get it in someone's diet? Because I find in all my years of cooking and working with people of different diets, I've learned that you really have to meet people where they are, because
Mm-hmm.
people don't easily change their diets. Most people change when either they get sick or someone they know or love gets sick. That's usually what it takes for someone to change their diet. It's kind of a phenomenon in my judgment. But I realize that if I create something that's easy to get into your diet and it's delicious, then we remove a lot of the hurdles. We remove kind of the things that keep it from becoming lifestyle. We really support it becoming lifestyle when it's easy and delicious. So with organ meats, it was the hurdles. Some of them you already mentioned, which is icky taste. It was not, knowing how to cook them. Most people have lost the art of cooking them. And then the third is sourcing.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I realized, okay, well, we already have freeze-dried powdered organ meats out in the Zygus. They're usually in capsules, and but it's a shelf-stable product. It's basically when it's freeze-dried, the moisture is removed from it, so it's completely shelf-stable. They're just putting it in capsules because they want you to swallow it and not taste it. But I was like, but if I work with the flavor just like you would in a pate, and I combine it with other shelf-stable things like salt and onion and garlic and herbs and spices, I can actually make it taste good just the way we would do in a pate. And that's where I started my brain started to go. And then it became like testing and trying it. And I started to get really positive results, because not only did the organ meats taste better in this combination, but what also happened is, see, the organ meats have an umami flavor to it. So we have
Right.
salty, sweet, bitter, sour, which is the four we get talked about a lot in school. But the fifth is umami. It was discovered in the 90s in Japan. And it's kind of, I would describe umami as like savory or meaty.
Mm-hmm.
Umami shows
Mushroomy too. Right.
mushrooms have umami. MSG is umami. Glutamate is umami.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, what I've found is that not only when you use Pluck are you increasing the nutrients of what you're adding it to, but you're also making the food taste better because of that umami. Because umami is a unique flavor, it brightens the other four flavors. So we get all this feedback all the time of people saying all I did differently was I just added Pluck to the meal that night, and this is a meal they've historically made every few weeks, and their family went crazy for it. They asked for seconds. They kept saying this is so good, and it's like it's the umami. It also could be that their bodies are craving the nutrition from the organ
Yes.
meat, and now it's showing up and their bodies want it, but I think it's a mix of the two. But I'll just end this saying, so Pluck is a mixture of beef, liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. And it has red mineral salt and then spices and herbs, organic spices and herbs. And it's literally no different than any other seasoning in terms of the texture and the shelf stability, but it's unique in that it's got the organ meat nutrition in it. And we always like to say, if you can salt it, you can pluck it. It's that easy. And as you mentioned, it's incredibly versatile. There's really not much that it doesn't taste. We haven't actually found anything it doesn't taste good with.
Yeah.
And it's such an easy way to get into your kids, because you could even be getting pizza to go and sprinkle it on the pizza and you feel a little bit better. You're like, well, at least they're getting their organs in today.
That's right. And I really believe in the fact that our cells, just on like the smallest level, will feel that just nutrient density coming through. And part of really wanting more, yes, it's the flavor, but it's the body going, yes, more of that. I need that.
You
I
feel it
used to
when you drink
joke,
bone broth too, right?
right? And we used
Yeah.
to joke when I went back to eating liver as I was in nutrition school. This is, 14 years ago. My husband and I had this joke that liver was the new coffee because we could both feel like an incredible boost of energy after eating liver. And I would make liver pate pretty regularly. And so then fast forward a few years, I have a child. My son has been eating liver pate since he was, 8 year old, maybe, maybe even sooner than that, but he still loves it. And when you were talking about pate, it actually made me think about calling it pate sprinkles for him. He already loves Pluck. There's no like, I don't need to convince him about putting it on. But I like this notion of the pate sprinkles.
It really
But
is. I
it's
mean,
really
that's
energizing.
yeah. I sometimes I even warn people. I'm like, don't use the pure because we have a fourth product called Pure, which is just the organ meat. It has no salt, no spices, no herbs, and that product is 100%, and it's really equivalent. Like 1 teaspoon is equivalent to 2 ounces of organs, so it's incredibly concentrated organ meats. And it's the same blend that we use in the spices and herbs, but those are not 100% because we're mixing it with
Right.
salt and spice and herbs.
Okay.
But I warn people, I'm like, you actually want to be careful about when you do the Pure because if you take it too late at night, you may get a surge of energy from all the B
Yes,
vitamins.
so true. Would you put the pure in like soups
Oh
and
yeah, the
yeah,
Pure is really cool. So I look at it. So we have three seasonings, and those ones are zesty garlic, original, and spicy mild. And we only add the mild because we want to make sure people understood it's not too spicy.
right?
It's really mild, and they're all designed to be pro family. Like you shouldn't have to mix. Like you could add the spicy mild to your taco night, and even the youngest kid would be okay. Like my youngest doesn't like spicy, and she'll eat it and enjoys it. But those three are really savory. They're designed to add flavor and nutrition. The Pure is a very neutral flavor. It's not as shocking as most people think it's going to be. Does have a little bit of a taste, but it's one of those things that if you just add it in a very small amount to something that does have flavor, you shouldn't taste it. Like you could add a fourth of a teaspoon, a half of a teaspoon to your smoothie in the morning, and you won't taste it. But you're getting what if you use I mentioned a teaspoon, that's
Hmm.
2 ounces. So if you use half a teaspoon, that's an ounce, of organ
Okay.
meats, which is a lot, right? So
Yeah.
you don't, a little goes a long way. And same thing goes if you're adding to soup. If it's a big enough soup for 4 people, I would probably only use 1 to 2 teaspoons. But you could basically add it to anything that has flavor from coffee to smoothies to soups, stews, sauces. I even will mix it into ground meat. And then
Hmm.
what's kind of cool is it's neutral enough that you could also go sweet with it. So as I mentioned the smoothies, but you could also technically, if you really wanted to, you could be making brownies and add it to the brownies. And
Amazing.
and
Yeah.
no one will know. I mean, it's your call if you want to do that, but you don't need to overdo it. Just half a teaspoon a day for most people is plenty. Um, so it's a really we kind of have a little bit of everything for people. Like even one of the reasons why we did Pure is because if you're someone who can't do the spices blends that we do have, but you make your own spice blend, well then just buy Pure and make your own Pluck. Like you can mix the Pure into your spice blend if you want to. So lots of versatility and options for people.
Amazing. I'm so glad you said that. I had not even thought of putting it in my smoothie, but I will definitely put it in
Yeah, a little
and
goes a
check
long
it
way.
out.
And I will share too, I just want to share this since you're pregnant, and maybe there's some other people out there listening that are pregnant. When I created this, I didn't know everything we were going to get from it. Like I didn't know that it was going to be as versatile as it is. We've now going and we're ending our fourth year, so we've learned a lot, and we continue to get testimonies from people. But this one I just heard recently that really hit home for me. This woman shared with us she just had her third child, and her first two she had hemorrhaging, and she had very little milk supply. milk production. Just they were tough pregnancies for her. And she shared that the only thing she did differently for the third one was that she used Pluck seasoning. So not the pure, the seasoning from day one through.
Mm.
Even now, she's still using it now that baby's drinking milk from her. Well, she had no hemorrhaging and she's had excessive milk supply. So she's literally had no problem. So she messaged us saying, I am a true believer in the power of organ meats and in the way that we're suggesting to people that you don't need to go big, you know,
Hmm.
to see the benefits, that you can get microdosing frequently, which is
Right.
cumulative effect,
Consistently is key.
consistency.
Key. Hmm.
And it's key with, in my judgment, with everything that is
Yeah,
healthy. If you're not consistent, then you're not moving the health needle as much as you think.
that's right. Wow. And you know, this number is actually on your website, and I've seen it in many places before, that 92% of Americans are deficient, right, in one vitamin or another. So when you combine that with something like pregnancy or any hormone journey, I mean, for women who are now transitioning through perimenopause or menopause, we really need to have all the building blocks that we need, and those are minerals and vitamins. And so this is such an easy way to add that, especially for people that don't like taking a lot of pills. You know, it's a great way. And you said something earlier about reputable company, right? When you were thinking about, oh, organ meats, they're dehydrated and we're taking them as supplements. The same goes for Pluck, of course. And I know that you've put a lot of effort into sourcing it because, yes, when you are eating the liver, this filtration system of the animal, same thing in our own bodies, you want to make sure it's a really clean liver, that it's an animal that was eating well, that was well cared for. So how do you source your ingredients?
Yeah, I mean, everything we do, I think that's really important for people to know, is everything I do is for my kids. So Pluck was created for my kids and myself too, but first and primary for kids. So quality is key, right? Because I'm not gonna make anything or give them anything that's gonna compromise their health. So, or at
Mm-hmm.
least knowingly. So we source from 100% grass-fed cows. We source from New Zealand. I've tried to source from the US, but the supply chain just is not there. It's hard to get every part of the animal that I want to get.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas New Zealand is an island, they get green grass year round. They're established the meat industry there as an export, and they've created a supply chain that covers pretty much all the animal. I mean, you can get brain there, you can get glands, you can get. I mean, so many of the products that you're seeing in these supplement companies is coming from New Zealand. So it's a very reputable place to get it from. We source it from, as I mentioned, 100% grass-fed cows. I specifically went to the sourcing it because that is one thing a lot of people don't realize, is they think, well, if it's coming from New Zealand, they're all grass-fed. That's not true. It's like the US too, where you have some grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, and then you have some conventional. But we specifically source from the ones that only get the 100% grass-fed. So um, that quality matters. We're making sure that there's no flow agents, no additives, no junk. We get organic spices and herbs. So they're not fumigated. They're also have no additives or flow agents, which once again is really key. Um, and then we source from Redmond Real Salt because we find that they are a reputable salt company, and we have active conversations with them and are very much always kind of both looking towards how can we be as transparent as possible and support the education around the micronutrients in their salt, and then of course in our product. So
Mm-hmm.
very keen for that.
That's amazing.
And I should also
So,
say, sorry, I should also say we
yeah.
third party test too. That's one thing everyone should always remember, that you can always reach out to any company and say, hey, can you send me your your third party testing, which is your certificate of analysis, which is, that's what you would call it, C of A. And
Mm-hmm.
most companies I mean, they should, technically all companies should supply it. I don't
Right.
know if there's any rules that say they don't have to, but they all have them. I
Yeah,
guarantee it.
it's
They all
so
get them.
important, especially the supplement industry. If they don't have third-party testing, it's like find another supplement company
Yeah.
because that is so, so important. Thank you for sharing that. And I know we had talked a little bit about too how something like this can help calibrate our palate, because especially for people that are really used to refined carbs and a lot of sweet flavors, like how do we get back to a place where we're eating and really getting in touch with more of what our taste buds need, what our cells need on like a, really deep level. How can this help?
Well, there's a doctor of archaeology. His name's Dr. Bill Schindler. He wrote a book called Eat Like a Human. And he has a great quote. He says, "We are the only species in the world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat." And that always kind of like makes me pause. But then what follows is hopefully going to make people even pause more, which is there's nearly 9 million species in the world. So the fact that we're the only one tells you how far away we've gone from our ancestral knowledge of what we need to eat, because it's there.
Hmm.
We've just confused it. And if you think about it, our body type is that of Homo sapien, and Homo sapien was really evolved over the last 300,000 years. So we have a biological communication system within us that has developed during that entire time. And how did it develop? So you think about, well, uh, let's say I'm, back in the day, I'm a Homo sapien going through the forest. I hear something drop. So first it starts with my hearing, right? And then my head turns towards where I heard that drop. Now my eyes see something kind of shiny in the tree in the distance. So now my eyesight is involved. And all this is a communication pathway, right? And then, so now I'm moving towards it. So my body's physically moving towards what I see in the tree. As I get closer, a smell comes over me. So now I'm smelling something, and it's once again informing me, is this something that's going to kill me or feed me? Right. And so then as I get closer, it looks plump and juicy. So I grab it. Now I'm touching it, and I can really tell that it's plump and there's something in there. I bring it closer to my mouth to take a bite, and now I can really smell it. And it's like, oh, this smell, like
Hmm.
my stomach is starting to get hungry because it's the smell of flavor, right? Because flavor
Hmm.
equals nutrition. So then I take a bite, the juices are running down my mouth. As I chew it, the flavor starts to deepen or sweeten. It depends on what it is, of course, but it's changing as I chew it. And once again, communicating to my body, this is something that's feeding me due to the flavor and thus the nutrition. And as I swallow it, I'm getting the communication of the nutrition, which then tells my body of when to stop. So all of these pathways are communicating not only what to eat, but how much of it.
Hmm.
And we bypass all of that if we just swallow our food in capsule form, or if we eat and rush it and we eat
Hmm.
standing up or in our car. We completely like bypass this communication pathway that's evolutionarily like developed and established within our bodies to ensure that our nutritional needs are met and that we are eating food that's not going to hurt us. And honestly, that is the way to reconnect with that ancestral knowledge. Now, is it ever going to be back to zero? No. We live in a modern world where our foods
Hmm.
are, Franken foods. Many of them are laboratory made, and they're designed to manipulate our addictions. They're designed to play with high flavor, but then have zero nutrition. So they're literally confusing our bodies, our evolutionary designed bodies. And I don't think there's a way to truly escape the modern world we live in unless you go off grid. But even then, you're still a part of you're a cog in the machine to a degree.
Yeah.
So
We can make the effort, right, to
yes,
have some home cooked.
exactly. There's things we could do. And if I were to
Mhm.
change, I know they don't really go by a food pyramid anymore, but that concept is very ingrained in us of that food pyramid. If I were to change that food pyramid, how I would look at it is I would simplify it. And I would basically boil it down to three things. So the very top of the pyramid would be keep all your foods as much as possible to flavors that are found in nature. So very, very natural flavors. So not added flavors, but natural flavors that are found in nature. So ideally that means foods that are ingredients versus have ingredients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then in the middle of the pyramid, I would have nutrient dense food, so real food. Just once again, food that is an ingredient versus has ingredients. Foods found in nature, real food, as minimally processed as possible. Then beneath that, I would have what's little talked about and probably one of the most important pieces to eating and knowing what is good for your body is mindfully eat. And that's
Mm.
really it. Choose foods that have natural flavors, um,
And natural colors.
colors, have real food, nutrient dense foods, and then mindfully eat it. Like really make sure that you are surrounding yourself with in a loving environment and an encouraging environment. Make sure that you're chewing your food, that you're in a parasympathetic state when you're doing it, and you're not overly agitated, excited, or stressed out. And just eat slow enough where your body, that communication pathway, will tell you when to stop.
Beautiful.
And obviously try not to distract yourself as you're doing it. Don't necessarily watch TV because that's not very mindful when you're eating.
Yeah. And you've basically explained a whole process. I do a mindful eating exercise with my clients, both one-on-one and in my groups. But it's everything you said from doing that journey from long ago when we activated eyes, nose, all of our senses around food and what was safe and what wasn't, and how to get it and how to prepare it. And the smells, especially the aroma of food, right? Because our digestion starts in the brain. If we were to close our eyes right now and thought of our favorite food, we'd just start salivating. Like just thinking about food can start that process. And I love that you illustrated it so perfectly, something we can still all do, even as an exercise, picking a blackberry, for example, and imagining coming across it for the first time, right? And figuring it out.
You
How do I
smell
know
it,
this
use
is
your
safe to
senses. Like,
eat? Yeah.
yeah, like really I love what you just said is don't assume it, like really rediscover it. Like
Mm-hmm.
pretend you're discovering it for the first time, touch it, smell it, lick it, whatever it is, like
Mm-hmm.
let it really let that communication pathway open up. We call that the neural lingual response, basically the process of that using your senses and eating your foods, the neural lingual response that we're tagging or tapping, I should say. And in many ways, it's a survival instinct. That's what it was developed to do. Because if you ate the wrong food back in the day, you died, right? It's like, and that still
Mm-hmm.
happens today, but at least we have some safeguards with certain medicine or medical system awareness. But this kind of communication pathway shows up physically as well. So if you think about it, when you go to try to lift something that's heavier than what you can lift, what happens to your grip? It gives out.
Mm-hmm.
That is the body making sure that you survive. Like that's your body protecting itself. Now, this also shows up when we're grocery shopping or when we're about to order food. And you just have to be listening, but think of it like this. And I'm sure people listening have experienced this, but where you go to grab the food from the shelf and your hand can't seem to grab it, it falls out of your hand. That is
Yeah.
anyone that's ever studied muscle testing, that is a form of your body rejecting the food.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to grab the food and you burp or you notice that you flatulate, or you notice that like your body has a physical reaction to it, that's also your body communicating to you with, I don't want this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like when you just mentioned, if you go to eat something, you start to already salivate, that's your body communicating, yes, eat this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're getting
Yeah.
this communication physically all the time. We're just not listening and we're not mindfully participating. So we're not, because I'm talking about mindful eat, but technically the mindfulness can be applied to shopping, be
Mm-hmm.
applied to cooking, can be applied to meal planning. There's so many things we can do more mindfully. I really believe, and that's why it's the bottom of that pyramid. It's the grounding because without the mindfulness, we're really just kind of like stuck in the pinball machine where the ball in the pinball machine is getting clocked around and being,
Mm-hmm.
banging up against things. Like we're really just stuck in the rat race. Otherwise, it's what distinguishes us from the environment we're in is the mindfulness.
Yeah. And if the majority of our eating pattern is, say, with something of a box, right, or something pre-prepared, and we're doing it while we're in meetings and while we're doing things, not only do we not get all the messages that the body is giving us, we also are getting a lot of what we don't need because now we're eating. And I mean, I've had the experience of multitasking, and here's my bowl of food, and I'm eating and doing something. And then I look at my bowl of food, and it's like, who ate my food? Like, no, there's just like, where is the feeling of satiety, the hormones, I mean, leptin and ghrelin that work so well together. We can override leptin all the time, which is the hormone telling us we're full. And it's after a while, they kind of give up working well, right? It's like, oh, I knock on the door, you never open. So it's a whole re-education around how to eat and how to listen um, to those signals that our bodies are giving us. So thank you for bringing that in because the mindfulness piece is so important. And when we're eating a lot of foods that were sort of engineered to make us want more and we're doing it distracted, that's when I think we really get in trouble physically, mentally.
And here's a very easy practice that everyone can start doing right away. And it doesn't have to be religious. It can just be take a breath before you start eating, before you start shopping, whatever you're trying to be more mindful of and more present to,
Mm-hmm.
just take a breath and maybe either say a prayer, be in gratitude, say grace, anything that's just going to get you right there. Just
Mm-hmm.
bring you right to that moment. The more you can apply that to everything you do, you'll see you make better decisions. You're not only more present for what it is that you're doing, but you're also more effective. And we have to stop we have to stop giving up our power of health to the big ag industry. I think there is this assumption that because it's in a grocery store that means it's safe for us to eat.
Safe. Yeah.
And we just have to remember that none of these companies, or I'll say at least the majority of them, are not in existence for your health. They're there because they had an idea and they saw a need or a marketplace for it and they wanted to make money. And
Yeah.
particularly if it's a big ag company at this point, they are driven by profits at this point. Otherwise, soda wouldn't exist, right? Or certain
Right.
things wouldn't exist. And these are billion-dollar companies. So they're clearly not going to, even if they know that soda isn't a healthy product, they're still not going to diverge because they're making so much money from it. So at this point, it becomes really up to us to be the
Mm-hmm.
gatekeepers towards what we're willing to put into our mouths and body. And
Yes.
so we have to be mindful about that because that's all we have. And and,
Yeah.
and sadly, that means we have to be diligent about reading labels. And I was just talking with a friend today, and she made a great point is that you don't want to be loyal to brands. And I know that that's counterintuitive for me to say, being like that I have a brand, but you don't. If there were five other organ blends out there, seasonings out there, which there aren't, I'm the only one, but
Mm-hmm.
but let's just say there were, I would want you to not be loyal to the brand. I would want you to be loyal towards looking at the labels and which one has the cleanest ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And to check every time because if let's
Because it
just say
changes.
they change, they get bought out and they change. Look at Ben and Jerry's. It was bought by Unilever back in the day, and it's like those ingredients in Ben and Jerry ice cream is very different from what they were in the 90s. Very
Yeah.
different. They were way cleaner back in the day when
Right.
when Ben and Jerry owned it. And so, you know, sadly, that is the world we live in, where you always have to be vigilant about reading labels. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say, kind of a last thing about labels is that the front of a label is a billboard. It is still a marketing piece. It's what's drawing you to grab the product. So you cannot go off of what the front of the label says. You have to turn the product around. You have to read the ingredients, and you want to
Mm-hmm.
read not only inside the box but outside the box, because even nowadays they're allowing companies to put some of the ingredients on the outside of the box, of that nutritional box. So you really want to read the back. It's the only part of the product that's truly regulated, and it's even
Yes.
then it's still not as regulated as it should be.
Yeah, marketing claims mean nothing. So reading labels, this is so rich because it's all the amazing things, right? Boost your nutrient density of your foods, mindful eating, mindful shopping, mindful preparing for your week, knowing I'm a huge believer in meal plans and I help a lot of people with that. But it's like just taking time and re sort of
Calibrating.
yeah, but designing around the mindset that it's not just a chore or a thing you have to do, but it's like actually putting on some music, having a cup of tea, figuring out what you want to eat for the week. It's such an act of self-love and an act of love for those that you feed. So being mindful around that. One of my teachers used to always say, um, as you chew your food, like notice when does it become you? And I love that so much because it's part of this mindfulness piece that you brought in, where it can really change what we decide to eat and how we listen to the body cues around like what feels really nourishing in the moment. If we just think this will become me, everything I put in here is going to be helping me build every cell in my body, right? Or not helping it. And so that's such a big piece. And then bringing in a little bit of the rest and relaxation with the prayer, the breath, or even just thinking, this will nourish me. Um,
Yeah,
thank you.
mantras,
Thank you
absolutely.
so much for bringing all of those pieces. I would love for people to go to your website, and there is a code for a discount, Nourish Together, all together. So Pluck, give us the website, James.
Sure, it's Eat Pluck at .com. So eatpluck.com is the website. You can also find us on Amazon. And we are on socials at Eat Pluck as well. And then I'm personally on socials at Chef James Berry with an A.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so excited to get Pluck into more people's plates. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your support and for spreading the plucking word.